My name is Amelia, and today I stand here, pouring out my heart to tell a story that I myself can hardly believe I have experienced. The husband I once trusted completely, the man I thought I had chosen to spend the rest of my life with, Jax, did something I could not imagine. When I think about it, my heart is filled with pain and confusion, as if all the values I once believed in were broken. Jax is not just a husband, he is a successful businessman, owning a large fortune that makes people jealous. Since we got married, we have lived in the admiration of those around us. Luxurious parties, expensive vacations, and everything that I thought only existed in the movies have become reality in our lives. Every time we appear together, he always holds my hand, giving me a feeling of absolute safety and protection. For me, Jax is the perfect person, the one I believe will accompany me through all the storms. However, beside all that halo, there always seemed to be a darkness that I could not reach, invisible silences that crept between us that I had overlooked or deliberately not seen. Part of this probably started with the appearance of James. I do not know when Jax and James met, but according to him, James had helped Jax a lot in big investment deals. Thanks to James, Jax not only increased his assets, but also enhanced his reputation and position in the business world. The two quickly became close friends, as if they were inseparable. Jax often told me that James was a precious friend, someone who could be trusted in any situation. I used to see them laughing together, discussing big plans together, as if they were two brothers who shared the same fortune. Whenever James came to the house, Jax always welcomed him warmly, and did not hesitate to praise his friend in front of me. Sometimes I even wonder if Jax really values this friendship more than marital love. At first, I didn't see any unusual signs in Jax and James's relationship. They met regularly to discuss work, and because of Jax's busy nature, I didn't question it much. I always thought I knew my husband well, and Jax always made me feel secure and confident. But then, one day in a conversation between the two of them, I overheard Jax mention something called a bet, a strange word that didn't fit his personality. What shocked me even more was that in that conversation, my name was mentioned in passing as an unimportant detail. At that time I didn't think much about it, reassuring myself that maybe I had misheard, or if not, it was just their way of joking. Jax and James had their own sense of humor that sometimes I had trouble understanding, so I dismissed my suspicions. But from that day on I began to notice strange things that I had previously overlooked. There were long phone calls late at night, secret meetings that Jax seemed to want me to know about. The feeling of being invisibly excluded grew stronger, but I tried to convince myself that perhaps they were just two successful, busy men who found a kind of empathy in each other that I could hardly understand. Then one Saturday afternoon, for the first time, I saw Jax come home with a different attitude. That day he came back with James after a long meeting. The two of them walked into the house, and unlike the previous times, Jax did not look happy. Normally he always smiled when he saw me. His eyes lit up as if all the stress of life had disappeared. But that day Jax's face was really gloomy, and when he looked at me, his eyes were hesitant, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. His eyes were sad, and even his familiar smile was gone. The feeling that something was wrong crept into my heart. James and Jax spoke to each other in short sentences, their whispers so low that I had to strain to catch a few words related to work, but could not guess the main idea. There was something in the air that night that made me feel uneasy. I can't explain it, but my gut tells me there's something deeper, more complicated going on between Jax and James than what they let on. When dinner was ready, I invited both of them to the table. Both Jax and James sat quietly, picking at their food without a word or a smile as usual. The atmosphere between them was heavy, and sometimes Jax's eyes seemed to touch me with an inexplicable anxiety. I tried to bring up some stories to ease the strange silence, but both of them only responded with short answers, avoiding my gaze. At midnight, while I was sitting next to Jax and James talking, Jax suddenly stood up and walked towards the refrigerator without any explanation. I watched his figure, frowning slightly in curiosity. After a while Jax returned. In his hand was a glass of fresh orange juice. He placed it in front of me, smiled slightly, and said softly, "Honey, you've been working all day. I think you should drink this glass of orange juice to replenish some energy." His words were gentle and kind, and I didn't suspect a thing. The clear glass of orange juice, with its fresh orange scent, made me feel safe and warm. I smiled in response to his concern and raised the glass to my mouth. The cool orange juice flowed down my throat, a bit of sweet and sour spreading, easing the tension that had been building in my heart since the beginning of dinner. I drank every last drop, thinking it was the usual thoughtful gesture from Jax, who always took care of me little by little by little. But only about 30 minutes after drinking the glass of orange juice, I began to feel my eyes getting heavy. My eyelids felt like there were boulders pressing down on them, making it difficult for me to stay awake. I tried to sit up straight, but couldn't resist the sudden drowsiness that came over me. It was a strange feeling. I had never felt so tired, as if my strength was being slowly drained. Finally, I couldn't resist any longer, so I stood up and said softly, "I'm a little tired. I think I'll go to bed first." Jax nodded, took my hand, helped me stand, and gently led me up to my room. My steps became slow and unsteady, but I felt Jax's arms holding me firmly, making me feel safe. Even though I was so sleepy that I couldn't keep my eyes open, I could still hear his deep, gentle voice, "Get some rest. I'll be here." I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow, dreaming in Jax's familiar arms. That whole night, I had no idea what had happened, didn't hear any noise from the living room or any changes in the house. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on me. My head was dizzy, my body felt exhausted, without any energy. That feeling of fatigue was not like after a normal night of lack of sleep. It was even stranger than the days when I had to work hard. My body felt like it had gone through something that I couldn't remember. Blurry images of last night flashed through my mind, but I couldn't piece them together into a clear event. When Jax walked into the room, his smile was there again, as if it was all just an ordinary day. He sat down next to me, ran his hand through my hair, and asked me if I had slept well. Looking into his eyes, I wanted to ask if anything had happened during the night, but felt shy, afraid that I was just imagining things. Jax said that maybe I was working too much, that I should take some time to rest. I couldn't understand why I felt so weak and tired, but there was no way to explain it. I could only console myself that maybe I was worrying too much, and maybe it was just because I was too tired. However, a small corner of my soul still had doubts, even though they were very small and vague. In the end, I nodded in agreement with Jax, closed my eyes, and tried to convince myself that everything was fine. But from that day on, deep inside, I began to realize that the doubts were growing, pushing me gradually into a spiral of inexplicable things. But from that night on, it seemed like James came to my house every day. Every evening, James appeared, and Jax welcomed him with inexplicable kindness. At first, I didn't suspect anything, but after a few days, I started to feel that something was wrong with their meetings. Every time James came, Jax would always give me something. Sometimes it was food he had prepared. Sometimes it was a glass of water that had been mixed without me knowing. At first, I thought it was just a normal act of concern, but when it became a series of repeated events, I couldn't help but question it. After each night like that, when I woke up the next morning, my body was no longer as healthy as before. My spirit gradually became exhausted, tired, as if my energy was being drained little by little. A vague, dizzy feeling covered me every day. I didn't understand why I was like this, and even blamed myself for overworking. But when this repeated for a whole week, I began to doubt. That night, exactly 1 week after this strange series of events began, was a Saturday night. I felt sure that James would appear again. And as expected, around dinner time, James and Jax came home together, sat in the living room, and started talking. A feeling of unease welled up inside me, but I tried to stay calm, telling myself that I had to play the role of a gentle wife, not revealing any suspicion. I prepared food for both of us, smiling at James and Jax as usual, but I had my own plan in mind. After the meal, Jax approached me again with a glass of milk in his hand. He smiled, gently saying in a caring tone, "Honey, you seem tired all week. I made you this glass of milk to help you sleep better." I tried to keep smiling, not showing any suspicion, and took the glass of milk from Jax. Even though I knew something was wrong, I still raised the glass and drank. At this time, I only took small sips, deliberately drinking less, only stopping when the glass of milk was half full. After about 5 to 6 minutes, I pretended to have a stomach ache, embarrassingly asking Jax and James for permission to go to the bathroom. They didn't suspect a thing, and I quickly left the living room, entering the bathroom with trembling hands. Once inside, I bent down and used my finger to poke deep into my throat to force myself to vomit out everything I had just eaten and drunk. The nausea hit me, and I tried to push everything out of my body. I threw up in waves, mouthfuls, feeling like all the food and milk were being pushed out. When I was sure that there was nothing left in my stomach, I washed my face, adjusted my clothes, and calmed down. I returned to the living room, trying to act as if nothing had happened. Looking through Jax and James' eyes, I saw that they were still laughing and talking normally, without any suspicion. I sat down, keeping my face calm, trying to hide my tension, and started chatting with both of them, but in my heart I had my own plan. I wanted to know what had happened during the past week, wanted to understand why every time I drank something from Jax's hand, I forgot everything the next morning. I sat and chatted for a while, trying to look sleepy. After about 30 minutes, I pretended to be tired and yawned slightly, as I was used to them. Neither of them showed any suspicion. Jax, as usual, stood up and helped me up to the room, gently led me to the bed, and covered me with a blanket. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my breathing steady, making him believe that I had fallen asleep. Lying on the bed, I kept my body as still as possible, not moving even a little, waiting in suspense. My heart was pounding, and the minutes passed without any movement. Finally, about an hour later, I heard Jax's footsteps softly entering the room. He stopped by the bed, and I kept my eyes closed, not daring to breathe too hard. He carefully checked to see if I was really asleep, then turned away, walked towards the door, and opened it gently. Then I heard James's voice. I almost held my breath, listening to every word they said, trying not to miss anything. Jax and James entered the room, and in the dim light of the nightlight, I saw them exchange glances, as if they had agreed on a secret plan in advance. Jax looked down at me, then turned to James, and nodded slightly.